Welcome back. So here we go on more talks about psychology of money in the new year. It's kind of fitting because, right, a lot of people relate to the year and the calendar cycle as time to sort of reestablish intentions and goals and priorities for the year. And so it's sort of fitting to talk about finances.
Yeah. It seems
Yeah.
as good a time as any to get
Sure.
into
Yeah.
it.
Well, so we're going to talk a lot about, we're going to get into more some technicality that you and I have both been relating to for years around bringing a lot more order to the journey around money and how order to money sets a person up for the most chances of success and opportunity to actually generate wealth in their lifetime, right?
Yeah. I think it might be good to start with a little story of how things began to shift for me. I think I mentioned in one of our previous money episodes about how, as a psychiatrist, I thought I was doing a great job to generate to be a good earner and to earn money, a lot of money for me, which was great to have a private practice and make enough money to pay for my family and what their needs were. But uh, over many years of doing that, it wasn't even on my radar to be saving money at all. And then I went to a seminar that one of our mutual friends recommended to me. And the guy was talking about this is a kind of a controversial character. His name is John DeMartini. We've had him on the podcast before. But one of the things that he talked about was being empowered in all the areas of life. And when he started talking about being empowered around money, all of a sudden I realized that the way I'd been earning money and spending all the money I made to cover my family's expenses every year, I didn't have a plan at all about the future. And that was something that probably a lot of people listening would be shocked to hear, but because maybe many of the listeners here already are aware that if you're not saving money, you're not planning for the future. But I thought everything was okay in that regard in my life until I went to that seminar, and I walked away realizing that I needed to, if I wanted to be prepared for a time in the future where I couldn't earn and couldn't work, I needed to be saving money. And that really shifted my perspective. And I've had a different relationship to saving since then.
Nice. Yeah. I don't remember the workshop, but I went to a workshop in Denver. I wish I could remember what it was called. There were about 1,000 people in this big conference room. And it was about the psychology of money and, but the whole thing was a sort of marketing pitch to do their coaching program. And first of all, it was kind of scary. I mean, it was like The Price is Right. They were like playing The Price is Right music and people were running up to the stage and getting all these free offerings. This was one of my first money workshops. And, but I did, take away a couple concepts there for me. And one of the concepts was how important it is to actually value wealth building, or you never will build wealth. And that if you don't actually care about building wealth, then mostly you're fantasizing about earning more money one day or making more money and actually saving it. And so there's something that really came across for me in that, and that was a long time ago, is the concept of that the way you accumulate wealth is by actually valuing keeping your money, some of your money, for the future of your life, right? And like you're talking about, and investing in your future. And so, maybe a good starting point is let's talk a little bit about the concept of retirement in this culture, financial freedom, and what that could mean to people. And why don't we start there? So the general kind of concept in this culture, right, is that sometime in your mid to late 60s, you retire, right? That's sort of the way the government has designed their retirement plans, is that like when you're done with your career, you're done with your job, you're done working sometimes in your mid to late 60s, and then you're living off of some different types of retirement plans, right? If you're fortunate. So that's kind of the cultural messaging, is you retire at some point and you work hard so you don't have to work one day. So let's start with that concept.
I'm smiling because it already feels pretty antiquated and obsolete. And I agree with you that that has been the messaging over the years, along with a lot of other kind of messaging around working and, staying with the same company for your career, for example. But the idea of being taken care of by the government at a certain age, after which you're not working, is something that I think probably most people are not in the fantasy that that's going to work out well, to follow along that storyline.
Yeah, so that's a nice piece to talk about. So there's what happens if you are in the retirement mentality. So the first thing is like, okay, you have to ask yourself a question, which is like, do I believe in what's considered retirement, right? Where basically sometime, probably in my mid 60s, I don't want to work. I want to have to work for money anymore. I probably won't even want to work, and I'm retired. And that's fine if you have that mentality. But then it's like, well, how are you going to achieve that, right? And the part of the cultural messaging is Social Security will get you there, right? From whatever you put into that in your lifetime, that it will actually be enough and that it'll be there forever. And then, of course, there's other, different types of retirement plans the government supports, right? If you work at a job that has 401k or whatever it is, right? So, but I think a good thing to talk through here is, okay, so let's say you do want to retire one day, you want to stop earning, and likely you should be considering about the possibility that you're not going to be able to earn enough money at some point in your life to sustain yourself actively through active income. I mean, not many people can earn enough active income till they're 90 if they needed to. So then comes, what's the plan? How are you going to do that? So that's the retirement model. So we'll talk about what's the plan there. But then there's also another model, which is, well, what would it be like to attain a different concept, which is the financial freedom concept, which is, it's not about not working. It's not about a year you're stopping working or but it's actually about at what point would you attain financial freedom where you don't have to work for active income in order to meet the lifestyle you want. And how are you going to get there? And is it 65 or is it 45 or is it whatever? And how are you going to get to that if you want that in your lifetime, right? It's a little bit of a different concept, financial freedom. Obviously, people who are planning on retire, you would hope that they're planning on financial freedom when they retire, right? I also heard, so we'll go down these two roads, but there's also another interesting thing, which is that the average, let's just talk for the moment of like sort of the average retiree, and we'll just talk about the United States. Each generation, the amount of their lifestyle that they can live off of is smaller and smaller in retirement than previous generations because of inflation, right? So yes. if people in the 1960s or 70s when they retired were at 80%, I'm making up some numbers here, we're at like 80% of their lifestyle in retirement than they were during active income. I don't actually know these numbers off the top of my head, but it could be as low as like 40% when people like us retire. We'd have to go research that, but it's a lot lower. So the problem here is that most people don't care to even think about this stuff. So they're not planning and they don't even know what's coming. So this is also a message of, you might want to look into this, because in 20, 30 years from now, if you're planning on retiring, or whatever age you are, could be 40 or 50 years from now, if you don't think about this stuff, you might be living off of 20% of your lifestyle if you don't plan properly. And that would be a big change in a person's lifestyle.
So just to define the term, when you're using the word lifestyle, what I understand you to mean is the basic expenses of living. So rent, food, utilities, the expenses of having a vehicle, if you're going to have a vehicle, those kinds of things. So having a 80% reduction in your rent, for example, means you're going to be living in a really different place.
Exactly. And it's whatever lifestyle you got accustomed to, this percentage. Mm-hmm. Like, person living off of 35,000 a year, I don't know what that means if it's an 80% reduction there, but it's whatever lifestyle you got accustomed to is what we're talking about here, right? So a person who had a very lavish lifestyle, it gets cut down a lot to a non-lavish lifestyle. So it's just important to note and to go look at this. I think the starting point is, okay, if we're just talking about when you become old, maybe you already are old if you're listening to this, but it's pretty wise to think about your future self. It's what you mentioned, Will.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the sooner the better, because the sooner you start thinking about these things, the earlier you can develop a plan. And if you're, on the younger side of this community, you might have decades to plan and save and develop a very sophisticated and high likelihood of having the kind of retirement years or financial freedom years that you want to have. It gets much harder to achieve those goals the older you are, as you pointed out.
Right. Now, I'm particularly biased about this concept of financial freedom versus retirement. I personally, it doesn't work for me to think about my life as a retired person. Sure, I might be one day, but that isn't what motivates me. That motivates some people. It doesn't motivate me to think about when can I stop working. It motivates me about how can I get to work tomorrow. But so I'm just in a different mindset, right? So for me, it doesn't motivate me to think about when can I retire. And that's fine if it motivates you. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not how I operate. So for me, what motivates me is the financial freedom concept, which is how long will it take me and how can I get there where I've actually earned my lifestyle and passive income from accumulating wealth that's invested, so that my choices aren't dependent on active income. Because when choices are dependent on active income, you lose some freedom, obviously. You lose freedom of the opportunities that you can choose. And again, that's, working toward that is a very hard road, particularly prior to the elderly years. This is not easy to achieve. But it motivates me because I think, as most people I've talked to, there's a level of stress of depending on your next paycheck. There's just a level of stress of that dependency. And, again, like most people, that's what they live in. And I personally find the pursuit of trying to break out of that pursuit as inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder if you could elaborate on what you think the differences are between the mindset of looking forward to retirement versus the mindset of working your way toward financial freedom, and why you're in the later, why are you in the second group of people? Why does that resonate for you?
I think it resonates for me because I just happen to be very, very value driven around service and career, just my orientation of my personality. So I'm super driven around career, and I'm super driven around a mission that includes a large body of people. So for me, I'm not orienting at all around when can I get out of that, because I can't wait to get out of it, or how do I get out of it? So I don't orient around that, just because it's so high for me as a value and the level of importance that I don't think about the day I can get out of it, because it's exciting to me, and it's what I think about, when I wake up in the morning, a lot of mornings. So it's like, I don't need a plan at this moment to can I get my way out of this? Now that's just because that career and service is just really important to me. It's not important to everyone. And for some people, the retirement mentality is actually a better mentality, because it's not important to them that's where they spend their time and energy and resources. Because it's important to me, the retirement mentality is not that relevant to me. But what's very relevant to me is still what happens in retirement, and for me, hopefully prior to retirement, which is financial freedom. Financial freedom is an element of retirement. You need financial freedom to retire. But the piece is the thing that's driving it is retirement.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that for me drives financial freedom is to have the experience of what people have in retirement, which is being financially free prior to retirement, so that I don't have the relationship of, the stress of the paycheck and what's going to happen if I can't work, and did I make enough money this month? Well, whatever it is, right? Like that relationship to money, that's the concept of financial freedom. Can you produce that with a strategy at some point to have that experience, not just to not work, right?
Yeah.
Now you need that to not work. So that's the retirement mentality. But the reason is to not work. So that's why I find it important, is because for me, the reason is not to not work, because it's so high in my values, but it's to have that opportunity and that freedom and that reduction of stress while I'm working. It's just a different thing because of my own value system.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a powerful thread of wanting to be able to maintain calling my own shots and not be dependent on the government or people around me, my family, when I eventually have a body that needs a lot of care. And, we take for granted the being able-bodied and being able to work and be productive that way. And it can be gone tomorrow, So having that foresight is really meaningful to me. And, like you, I think I'm in the group that lives to work rather than works to live. If, people have heard that phrase before, sort of people who don't have a big value on career or a lot of existential meaning from being mission based, let's say, in career. Maybe you're mission based in other areas in your life. So, yeah, for me, that existential meaning I get from working is not something I'm looking forward to hanging up ever. You probably have to tear me away from my desk at some point.
I've tried to tear you away from your desk.
you've
I'm still trying. Although this morning you came in and you're tearing me away, but we're tearing each other away.
Yeah. Well, it's good to exhale and inhale, but
exactly.
But the idea of having the choice to work or not work based on having achieved having done the hard work, had the discipline, the commitment, and not just the internal resources to create that financial freedom, but also, we have to acknowledge that there's also luck and there's also external factors that are involved in being able to get that far with financial empowerment. So,
Oh yeah,
but
absolutely.
but getting there, I think, is something that's really exciting to me. The goal of getting there and being on the road to getting there, no matter where I am on the path to get there. I just like being on the road to get there because it feels responsible in my system to care for that part of myself and to work toward a level of health in that department of my being.
Yeah, and it's good you brought out that. Yeah, there's different groups of people and places in the world where this is not. There's places in the world it's not a possibility. There are groups that have way more obstacles to get here, but obviously this is getting a message out to anyone who's interested in getting there. Even though they might have different obstacles and it's way harder than it was for me or whatever it is, right? There are a lot of people who are interested in either retiring or getting to financial freedom earlier than retirement, right? Those are both important realities. And from a lot of the people I've talked to, like there are people who relate to this, okay? There's people listening right now that are like, yeah, I relate to this all the time. Like, I'm on a path. This is how I'm going to get to retirement, or I'm getting to financial freedom this way. There's a lot of people that don't think about this at all. And they're just hoping it works out, basically. And, I was doing that until probably 6 or 7 years ago. I was hoping it was going to work out. And then 6 or 7 years ago, I realized it wasn't going to work out the way I wanted when I started actually asking myself the question of what do I want it to look like? And I was realizing it's not going to be what I want if I don't do something about this. So I think that's the first thing I would, offer to people, which is you got to ask the question, what do you actually want this to look like? Like really get serious and sit down and either write about it or whatever, or have a conversation with someone, but get very specific. What do you want either financial freedom before retirement or during retirement to look like? Because if you don't know what you want it to look like, I guarantee you'll be disappointed. Because then you don't even know what you're going for. And then you're just basically allowing the universe to show you what you're not getting. Because you won't realize until later what you're not getting if you don't think about it now. So you're just going to be disappointed as, you're just randomly sort of getting thrown into this phase of life. And you're like, oh, I guess this is what I have now. And now, and so because there was no long-term strategy, which often leads to disappointment with matters like this. So I think it's a really important thing, just asking yourself a very basic question and really getting serious about what do you want this to look like? And are you willing, let's say you come up with the idea, it looks like, let's say financial freedom looks like this, and I want it in 10 years or whatever it is, 20 years, and whether that's the retirement concept or not. And then comes the really hard question, which is how are you going to get there? Right? How are you going to actually get there and how are you going to start tomorrow? Well, let's talk about a few of the items about starting tomorrow. If this is relevant to someone who hasn't started or maybe they've done a little bit.
Yeah. I was thinking about, end of year reflections and future goals for 2023. And I came across this guy by the name of Gustin. I think you've met this guy. He coaches people on like goals, goal setting, organization, and stuff. And he has a question he asks that really resonated for me, which is, who do you need to be? Like, what kind of person do you need to be for these goals to become real? So it's not like a kind of a kid in the candy store kind of fantasy of like a dream about all the things that you want, maybe. Which is how I think a lot of people approach thinking about the future of like financial future, like, oh, what will I get to buy? As opposed to who do I need to be in order to be able to save money this way or invest money this way or take care of my financial world this way. And, I think when I asked myself that question, I asked myself, well, what do I actually know about how to handle money in a responsible way? And it's, not that much is the answer to that, like how do you become empowered? Well, in any, like if I want to speak Portuguese, I have to take a class in Portuguese. It's not, I wouldn't sit around thinking, well, if I just go to Brazil, I'll just open my mouth and Portuguese will come out.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing with anything you're going to learn. Like you need to become a student of the thing.
Right.
Right. So keeping that in mind as we move into tactical pieces here and start talking about some of the practices that can help people get there.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I mean, anybody that's listening and is interested in, let's say they have not taken financial freedom or retirement, they haven't really taken many steps toward any of it, you have to become a student. And increasingly more and more time into being a student in this endeavor, if that becomes very important to you to do these things. Because even, listening to a couple hours in a podcast isn't going to do it. Right. So I'm glad you said that. It's, yeah. Mm-hmm. I've struggled with being a student, so I'm a slow learner there, but I come along. So, well, I think the first really important thing, the first thing that's very important is you have to actually know how much money you need to live off of for whatever this is, whether your financial freedom is, prior to the cultural retirement age, or whether it's at the cultural retirement age. You need to know how much money you want to live off of.
Right. What's your budget?
What's your budget, and what's your ideal budget, and what's your the absolute minimum.
I can get by budget.
Yeah, you need to know those two, and then if your ideal budget is a lot higher, are you willing to go after it? Right. So you got to get clear on those two concepts. And then you need to get educated around how much money do you need to accumulate in order to produce that money. And we're not going to get into that today. So once you figure out how much you want to live off of, whatever year you want to manifest this by, then you need to, go to a financial advisor, so on, to help you figure out, well, how much money do you need to accumulate to do this? And whatever, you may be counting on inheritance or whatever, but you need to figure that out. And then comes the strategy. Well, how are you going to do it? Right? How are you going to get there? And I would look at right now, like, what's the path you're on? If you don't change anything, where are you going to get to? A lot of people, if they don't change anything, aren't even going to be close to this ideal number. Right? A lot of people aren't even going to get close to the ideal number.
Especially with inflation. That's a whole nother piece.
That's another piece. That's right. And that's the whole piece of why the percentage of their lifestyle, well, as they get older, keeps decreasing because the rate of inflation over time. So, yeah, you just want to get clear on that. And I think a good starting point then is this changed my life, which is forced accelerated savings. The only way you're going to get there is to start to change your relationship between consuming and investing. If you're not on the road already, where you've already got the plan mapped out and you're fine, you're done, you don't even need to listen to this, then you have to change your relationship to investing and consumption. and how much is going to consumption and how much is going to investing. And the thing that changed my life is forced accelerated savings. It totally was a game changer for me. And that's just the concept that, first of all, you're putting money into savings, a certain amount, let's say monthly for the moment. And you're increasing the amount you put towards savings. Maybe it's quarterly. I mean, people do this in different rhythms. Let's just throw out the rhythm quarterly for the moment, that you increase by some percentage every quarter the amount you're turning towards savings. It's very difficult for most people to get to their goal just by saying, okay, here's the number and I could do it already and I'll get there. Typically, we don't have enough earnings to do that right now with how the economy is operating. So this force accelerated notion, what it does is that over time, you're putting more and more away towards savings, which means eventually you have to earn more to keep up.
Right.
Is what it means.
And to get even more granular, so you basically take what you have available right now. We'll stay in the monthly rhythm conversation for now. And you decide what would be a comfortable amount for me to put in a savings account every month, starting now. It doesn't matter if it's $5, $500, $5,000, whatever it is. And you just start there.
Right.
And then you pick the rhythm, whether it's quarterly. A lot of people do quarterly. Let's just say quarterly increases of an amount that's subtle enough that it doesn't cause you emotional stress, doesn't cause a disturbance, like 10% increases per month. So, $5 in the first quarter, $5.50 in quarter two, and
That's
so
right.
on.
That's right. And eventually what happens is, even if you start small, eventually what happens is, if you've committed to it, eventually you have to earn more money. You may choose to consume less to deal with that, but eventually you can't consume that much less. And then you have to start earning more. Now, this, for most people's, when they get really honest with their financial freedom goals, what typically happens is they realize over time they do have to earn more. Most people in a job or career earn more over their lifetime. That's just what happens for most people. But this really pushes the agenda that you have to keep up to do that. So that changed my life. It's powerful, but it's also like, if you don't commit to it, then you fake it, and then you don't increase one quarter, and then you stop increasing, or you stop even doing it. I think the key here is automation. You got to set this all up in automation, so you can't mess with it unless you actually have to go in and cancel the automation.
Yeah, it's to me, it's so similar to getting into a disciplined rhythm with workouts. It's like physical fitness. You put in the time, you do the reps. It's not glamorous. You have to do it when you don't want to do it. You have to just show up. 99% is showing up. It's the same exact thing with this. You automate it so you get your emotions out of it and get the ego out of it. So you can't mess with it.
Right. And I think it's very wise from an energetic and psychological perspective. Let's say you live on a paycheck. Now, not everyone does, okay? Not everybody has a paycheck, but let's just use the concept of a paycheck. It's very wise for the first thing you pay is your investment in yourself from that paycheck, is the savings account, before you pay everything else. In the automation cycle of the month, and that you're investing in your future, and then everything else, all the bills and the lifestyle, gets paid after that. But not like, oh, do I have enough now that I've paid everything else, right? Because then you're not actually prioritizing it over everything else. You're actually putting it on the lowest end of consumption. Then it's like below consumption. It's below everything else of like, well, I'll invest in myself if I got what I want this month, or if I pay my bills, or So again, you might be starting out with a number that you're investing yourself, like you said, is $5, right? Like really low. That's what you can afford. So it's not about being irresponsible with these expenses and things. But the statement to yourself of, I'm going to do this first. I'm going to, I'm going to invest in my vision for how I want money to be in the future first, and how I feel in my nervous system about money into the future. Once we invest in that first, it's a whole different psychology that we're walking around with every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's also about creating order in your systems. Like when you said automating the savings plan, that's an important example of developing order to hold I think of it as a pot that's holding a plant. Like a plant doesn't grow well without a pot. You need containment. Just like I need a schedule and accountability to go to the gym to work out physically, I need the same thing for financial fitness and health. And so you can think about money as a system that flows from places of disorder to places of order. And so
Right.
it becomes a priority to get your house in order, to clean up your room, to actually have a space in your financial world that's organized, where you're keeping track. You're actually looking at what you spend every month and what you take in, and ratcheting up the savings.
Well, so that leads me into the next concept. So let's say you come up with your plan. And again, like ultimately, we're not financial advisors. People need a financial advisor to help them with this. But so let's say you get your strategic plan around forced accelerated savings, or you could even call it forced accelerated investing, because you're going to do something with that money. So it's doing something for you versus sitting idle. And then the other concept is having your reserves, right? Like money you can depend on if you need it. So, that's the concept of sitting on some money that is very liquid, very accessible, that the cushion is big enough that if your money went away tomorrow, your active earning, or it slowed down, or there was a big recession, which people have been talking about for years, and they're still talking about we might be heading into in 2023. And let's say your business slows down, or your paycheck, or you get laid off, that you have this cushion to rely on, or there's an emergency. And the reason for this is, one, we don't want to get in a bind where we don't have money to rely on, but it's also about psychological stability around the relationship to money.
Right. Yeah. So not being in a pinch where you have to make an emotional decision, or a decision that's driven by a lot of stress.
Right. And it's also, again, it's showing yourself that you care enough to put some money aside, right? And not just consume it. So this is different than investing money, so to speak, for your long-term future. This is money for the rainy day. And it's showing yourself that, I'm going to also take care of that part of myself. Because you probably have a rainy day in your life, right? Yeah, financially. Almost everyone does. So it's also like, I'm going to take care of all of me financially. I'm going to try and take care of the rainy day part of me. And I'm going to care that much about myself or my family or whatever this concept is, right? So that's another piece. And, generally speaking, it's typically anywhere from 3 months to 12 months that people like to plan for that, of living expenses, basic living expenses that would get you by. And people have different formulas for that. Was that an important milestone for you, doing that practice?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. It has me feeling, I think you said it the right way, is how it resonates for me is emotional stability. And just knowing, I think there's another milestone for me in the future, which is having my house paid off. Like that,
Yeah.
I think is going to also give me an emotional stability.
Right.
That I've heard people who have achieved that talk about, that the bank can't take away their house if they have a rainy day situation that happens.
Right.
But yeah, having a sum of money to cover me for and my wife for, you know, a period of time definitely has me feeling like I can not be worried about that.
Yeah.
That's covered.
Yeah. And it's important to know, like, depending where you are in your lifestyle or what you're earning, like these numbers might not be big. Um, and there's always a little money somewhere in the budget to allocate away from. Typically, it'll allocate away from toward these activities, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's, you're going to the coffee shop or whatever it is, there's always some way to allocate a small amount of money. Again, like you said, it could be $5 a month. Let's say it's $100 a month. And then,
Sure.
5 years now, whatever, it's accumulated and you've got, your $5,000 to $8,000, right? So that amount of money for some people who have $0 in savings and $0 invested, now you have $5,000, you're starting to build confidence and you're starting to relax a little and you're in that relationship to scarcity, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one low-hanging fruit that people often talk about as a first step, if you haven't considered these ideas before, is, the $4 to $5 latte that you get on the way to work every day. That you think about that times 300 or however many work days there are, and you're looking at over $1,000 in coffee that you're spending per year. And it doesn't mean quitting coffee. Maybe it means making your own coffee. Those little things that can really add up and matter quite a bit over time.
Right. Right. There's also the concept of investing in or consuming depreciables versus appreciables, right? That, many things we consume depreciates. For instance, like things you might buy at the store. There's a lot of items we might buy that depreciates and the value goes from $100 to $0 in a year. You couldn't even sell it for, maybe you could sell it for a few bucks. And that's fine. We have a lot of things we need to consume that depreciate, right? And then there are things that appreciate, like a house typically appreciates over time. And so there's this concept of just being mindful and starting to take an inventory in your way that you purchase things. Of, are you buying highly depreciable items only, and you have very little that appreciates in the way you buy things? Or are you buying things that, the depreciation curves on them are slower? And you're also trying to buy appreciating items in your life, like houses or whatever it is, over time. It's an important thing to pay attention to, because I think that if we get in super high consuming loops, which all of us can, and we buy items that depreciate very quickly all the time, that's a message to ourselves. The message to ourselves, if that's the only loop we're in, is I want to get rid of my money as fast as possible. That's the message to ourselves and to the world around us. I want any money that comes toward me, I want it to go back to zero as fast as possible.
It's sort of like in physics, there's a force of entropy that always wants to create more and more disorder.
Right.
And it's part of the expanding universe as we know it. And, I've noticed in my life, and I think a lot of people can relate, that there's a feeling of entropy in life. Like the pile of laundry gets bigger and wider if it just sits there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same phenomenon you're talking about with depreciable assets versus appreciable assets. That you're actually buying things that go into as much disorder as possible in the shortest amount of time. If it goes from X amount to zero in a year, that's a pretty high level of entropy in your financial world that you're creating. Right. Versus like something that goes into more appreciation. has the opposite effect.
Exactly. Yeah. And even, we're going to have to consume a lot of things that depreciate. I mean, it's at least financially depreciate. There's other ways that they appreciate. But for instance, food, right? Like it will depreciate to $0 as soon as we eat it. And it appreciates inside of us in a different way, it changes form. But
Depends on if it's
financially,
healthy food or not. But yeah.
well, exactly. That's true. It does depend on that. Well, that's a good point, right? So, it's just about being mindful around how much are we putting into depreciables, how quickly. And I think it's, again, like for me, it's sort of the middle way here. It's like, I personally have tried to be rigid with myself with finances. It's never worked for me. It's just not how I'm designed. It doesn't work well for me. So I think it's about mindfulness here and actually caring enough to ask the questions of like, what am I doing here? Do I want to shift this somehow? That alone, if you're willing to engage that process and stay in committed to the process, your whole financial reality will change. But that's actually hard to do if you have never done it and you're not willing yet. Then it won't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just about being honest with yourselves. Right.
Right. Yeah, and I think that I think for me there's another piece to talk about, which is budgeting. Some people swear by budgeting, and it works really well for them. Every year, I set a strict budget for myself in 10 categories of spending and all this and that. Like, I actually don't have one year that I actually followed it, just because I'm I'm a little undisciplined and lazy there, but that's just me. It doesn't work for me to budget that well. What actually works for me better. Now I do set intentions of what I want to spend on in a year. That works really well for me. Do I want to buy anything new this year? Do I, how much do I want to spend on my home this year? Like that actually works well for me. How many trips do I want to take this year? It's loose though. I don't, have some big budget I look at once a month and make sure I did it. And so for me, that works well. But what works better for me is committing to I want to invest in a year. Maybe I don't meet it, but that works much better for me just with my mentality versus committing on only spending a certain amount every month.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Are you a budget person and commit to a monthly spend?
Like you, I haven't been able to, that hasn't worked well for me. What has worked well is similar to what you're describing, I think, is going into a bigger why, like a deeper why of why do I want to spend X, Y, or Z? I want to take this number of trips, or if I need a new car because my car's 10 years old, or whatever the thing is, for me, it's actually a lot more helpful to think about, well, I need this so that I'm not going to have to be stressed out about getting to work. I need a new car, so I'm going to feel comfortable on my way to work, or something like that, so that I can arrive with a fresh nervous system that's going to be able to face the challenges of the mission-based work that that we're so passionate about. I want my deck to be as clean as possible, and so I link the investments in my health and my stability and my financial world all into that, because those are my highest values. Is that mission-based work, and also the quality of my relationship at home is really important to me, and so I feel like there are higher levels of fulfillment that I can get to if I invest in myself and take good care of myself to the best of my ability.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my home life is very important to me also, and a lot of my financial goals or path is about my family life. It's also about my mission, obviously, because I believe I can accomplish more of my mission by being well resourced. I just believe that, but it's also for my family, and there's an element of just I have a child and all of that, right? I think that when you were talking, I was like, what would I say to my 20-year-old self, about this stuff? I don't know why that came up for me. But I want to just speak to that for a moment, which is, if I could speak back to my 20-year-old self, I would be saying, because I was slow at this. Like, I waited till I was really late 30s to 40, which is late for some. Some people start going towards this in their 70s. I've actually met some of those people. That's fine too. So, but it was late for me compared to some of my peers that I grew up with. What I would say to my 20-year-old self is, like, you're going to earn money anyways for the next 20 years. All you have to do is put these principles into play now, and you'll be 20 years ahead, even if you don't know your mission yet or whatever. So I think I just want to speak to that for a moment, which is, for people who are younger, just setting the intention and putting these principles into play when you're younger. You're so much more likely to actually start living into the desires you have here much sooner if you act on them earlier. And if you're like me or somebody who's waited even longer, like, there's never better than right now. And it's never too late, honestly. I mean, I've met people in their 70s that did this from 70 to 80. That's when they did it. Cool. Great.
I also think that there's a season in life for every curriculum that we prioritize, and I know for me, when I was in my 20s, taking care of finances was the last thing on my mind, and getting a really good education and trying to find the right partner to live with were the two kind of main things that I was focused on. And I got a lot of value out of focusing on those things in my 20s, and I don't regret the timing of that. It's but I do think about it, what you just said, of like, well, if I had only known a few of these very basic secrets, and hacks to begin the process, I think I would love for my 20-year-old daughter to know these things and start acting on them sooner than later. Just because it's so much easier. The steps you have to take when you're 20 are much different from the ones that you have to take when you're 50.
That's right. The steps that, if you start taking the steps at 20, also, you probably will have to earn less in your lifetime.
Right.
Than if you wait till you're 50. And that's okay. If you wait, like, again, I focused in my 20s solely on mission. I mean, I had relationship things going on and whatever, but I wasn't thinking about money at all. It was mission. And that was great for me. And if I would have put these things in play for those, age 20 to, let's say, 40, it would have been different for me. And that's okay. That wasn't, but it would have been different. And it'd be nice to have known a couple basic things. I mean, I knew how to balance a checkbook. Some people don't know how to do that. Right. Well, you don't even have a checkbook now, but I knew how to, I actually had a high value around putting money into a savings account. So I had like one of these pieces that just came along with me from my childhood, but I was missing a bunch of the other principles. Yeah. Yeah, when my wife met me, she's like, "Oh, you're a good saver." And I was like, "I didn't know that, am I?" And, I was, because I wasn't making that much money when she met me, but I put away some money and it was just sitting in an account, but I knew no other principles because that was sort of what I was surrounded by where I grew up. Like, it's put some money in an account somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do we want to wrap up with here?
I think we already invited people to ask the first question, which is just to get curious about you and yourself, and to be really honest as you appraise what your values are and how important it is to have a plan for your financial future. If that is a priority to you, then there are ways to do that that don't have to be stressful and can actually be quite joyful in the practice of it. I think that there's always, in my mind, which is an anxious, obsessive mind, there's always ways to make something stressful that doesn't have to be stressful.
Right.
So, but that's not the only way to do this at all. And that's another way to think about it. It's like, is it fun when you develop physical fitness, when you're doing something that you enjoy? It can be the same way with any fitness at any level in your life. It can be stressful or it can be joyful. So,
Yeah, it could be.
It's really about the mindset.
Well, here's another, I think a good place to end is what about the person who says, I'm so overwhelmed. Like I want to do this, but I can't seem to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think about these things from time to time, but I can't seem to get my life in order in this area of my life. Like I'm too overwhelmed. I'm scared. I'm, this is only for rich people. Like, there's attitudes of like, there's nothing to do here. Like that's a privileged conversation only.
Right.
But yet you think about it and you want to do something, but yet you feel too burdened by your circumstances and how you're living your life that you can't do anything about it. Right. It's the attitude.
Yeah. Well,
what would you say to that person?
I guess my answer to that is that the first and often biggest missing resource is time. And what I mean by that in this context is, why won't you give yourself time to consider yourself here?
Right.
Why won't you privilege yourself?
Yeah, I like that answer a lot.
And why are you putting whatever the thing is that's overwhelming you in front of yourself and your regulation?
Yeah, it's a great answer. It's like, why are you say that and like, but then why are you scrolling social media for 2 hours a day? If that's really true, right?
Yeah.
When you could be using that time to go learn and watch YouTube videos and, really study and, why. And then the answer is, well, I'm too overwhelmed. Well, then I think that my answer to that is, well, then you need therapy to help your nervous system or something. You need something to help your nervous system at that point. Because I think you're right. Time is a big factor for people. There are a lot of people, they're working a lot of hours a day. They're barely getting by, and they have families, and there really isn't a lot of time. But I think that the answer to that is, then how can you become more efficient with your time? Where can you become efficient to start learning about this? Just 5 minutes a day.
Yeah,
just like brushing your teeth. Where can you put this in?
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. Well, thanks for the conversation.
Thanks, Keith.
All right.
See you next time.
Bye.